Good morning. Today is Thursday, May 21st. One of my sons recently, in a conversation that he was having with his mother, actually, made an observation about how fragile this virus has shown us to all be. The truth is that we are all fragile. We want to appear strong, and we want to appear organized, and we want to be in control of things that go on in our lives. But down deep, and maybe not too deep, we understand that everything can change. We understand now everything can change overnight. You may go to bed one night, maybe having had a slight cough, and then a few hours later you wake up very, very sick with this virus. It's shown us to be very fragile. This humanity that we are fragile beings, and a lot of things can come along that can get in the way of what we picture life is supposed to be. But we're so fragile that so much can change. We find out that we're fragile in our very living. The very life that we live is fragile. 5 months ago, very few of us, if any of us, had ever heard the phrase COVID-19. This microscopic organism that came from the other side of the globe now in these months has utterly changed our society. It has changed us, at least temporarily, on nearly every front. And now we are approaching nearly 100,000 people who have died in the United States from this microscopic virus. Wow, doesn't that show how fragile we are? Our circumstances are fragile. We in Oklahoma really ought to be able to understand this as well as anybody in the world. We might, as everybody else, we might spend years gathering together what we consider normal parts of life. We get a house, we get cars, we have a job, and then in a matter of minutes, it can all be gone. I say we in Oklahoma because we're very familiar with tornadoes. And we know that at any moment, now forecasting is better and better, so it's not going to sneak up on us really. But we know how fragile we are. Life can be swept away. Our houses can be gone. Our cars can be gone. If it hits your place of business, the business can be gone. Swept away in a matter of minutes. Wow, our circumstances are indeed fragile. And the plans that we make are so fragile. I have heard it said that if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. We know that things, if we just stop to think about it, we know things can change just in an instant. And everything that we thought was going to be may not be. I want to read you something from the book of James that really talks about this. James chapter 4, starting in verse 13. I'm going to read down through verse 17. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. Well, James certainly understood this idea of the fragility of life, how everything can change. We may make plans, we may have in mind that we're going to do something, but all of that is subject to change. And change because of things that are really out of our control. This passage, I think it's very interesting. that it ends with a conclusion in verse 17. After it's talked about how uncertain our plans are in all of this, it gets down to a therefore, and therefore we know the lesson being contained. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. Therefore, if we are waiting on our own plans to make everything work, if we are dependent upon things going exactly the way that we think they ought to go, then we may be putting our emphasis in the wrong place. We may not have the right priorities in our life, because our priorities may indicate what we choose to do first. They may choose where we put our emphasis. And therefore, when we are looking at how changeable all of life is, we need to be putting our emphasis on those things that are truly important. If it is the right thing to do, let's not put it off until after we get our lives in order. Let's do it now. If there's a right thing for us to do, let's not make it dependent on our plans, but let's seek the will of God and do those things. This also reminds me back in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6, down in verse 33, after Jesus has talked about why we shouldn't be worried about things, what we're going to eat or what we're going to drink or what we're going to wear. He says, God knows that we have a need of all these things. But then Jesus says, but you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added. There is a priority that is given to us. And the priority is not to pursue the things that we think are important. The priority is to put our emphasis on the very will of God and let him work through us. So, looking at all of this, we would conclude that nothing is certain except God himself. So, with that in mind, where do we put our faith? Certainly not in the things of this world, not in material possessions, and certainly not in our own strength. There's something bigger that needs to be considered in where we put our faith, and that thing that is bigger is God himself. We put our faith in him and in his will, and when we do that, then we get to progress knowing that no matter what happens, no matter how our plans go, the will of God is carried out. How do we plan for tomorrow? Well, do we just disregard tomorrow? Well, no, that would be really short-sighted. That would be a little foolish. James doesn't tell us to not give thought to tomorrow. We are to give some very serious consideration perhaps to what we're going to do tomorrow. We need to give consideration as to how we're going to spend tomorrow's hours. But we do so knowing that everything can change. And when things change, it may very well be that we are being guided into something that's more important than what we had in mind. James didn't say, don't give any thought to tomorrow. He said, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. We put our hand in the hand of God, and we put our trust in him. And as we seek his will, we seek his will in all things, whether they are planned or not. We may have our plans change, our circumstances changed, our health change. Everything can change in a moment. And so, how do we plan for tomorrow? Well, we plan for tomorrow with our hand in the hand of God, knowing that whatever happens, everything's going to be okay with him because we are trusting in him. Does not mean everything's going to be easy. Never promised that. But as we plan for tomorrow, we do so knowing that the only thing that is steadfast and sure is the presence of God. And then the question is, what then do we pass on to the next generation? We are living at a time of the year that we're seeing high school and college graduations, and it's a happy time. Celebration of accomplishments up to this point, and the recognition that there are all these young people making wonderful plans for their future. But let us understand that the most important thing we can pass on to them is for them to, first of all, rely on God. Their plans may change. Indeed, I can say they almost certainly will change. Very few graduating people end up doing what they have in mind they're going to be doing. And even if they pursue that same career path, it's not exactly what they thought it was going to be. Things change. We get a bigger picture as life goes on. But if we start with our reliance on God, then we're comfortable with whatever change comes along. I would add into this, here's a side note, don't take yourself too seriously. You are only partially in control of your life. Any of us is only partially in control of our life. What is important is that we are living with the reality of the steadfastness of God and the fragility of everything else. So, fragile person, I say to you, understand what is steady, what is trustworthy, and what will not change. Trust in God. Walk with Him. And let your walk with Him be a joyful experience, for it is there and only there where we have our hope and our strength. Today, let this be a joyful day, knowing that the end of the day may not be what we expect it to be, but as we walk with Him, we walk with joy. Go this day and be happy.